So I was at a school once, and was bringing my walking to listen work to them. And the students are so busy, they've got so much going on. And here comes this, guy rolling up saying, "Hey, anybody want to go walking to listen with me?" In their crazy, hectic lives. And God bless them, 3 sweet students raised their hands, signed up, I'll go walking to listen, sure. They don't even know what this means, It's so brave, really, and generous. And the experience was going to be modeled off of what I had experienced while walking across America. What does it mean to walk to listen? What does it mean to be a trustworthy listener? And then how can we as a community come together to support these young people in their journey in the way that I was supported at the end of mine? Encircled, seen, celebrated, and listened to. And so these 3 young adults and I got dropped off in town, far from campus, a few miles, away from the bubble of campus, where we're all in our own little worlds and forget that we're a part of a greater ecosystem here. And it was like we parachuted into this place, and it's like, okay, where are we? We don't know what's going on, And it quickly became apparent that it was an African-American neighborhood. People of color, no white people walking around. All of us were white. And all of those little thoughts that keep us from connecting with one another were coming up, in my mind at least. I would imagine in their minds too, the kids. Probably in the folks who were seeing us, maybe, I don't know. But am I supposed to be here, this isn't my neighborhood. I'm white, we shouldn't do this, am I being disrespectful? My version of the thoughts that keep us from one another. We've all got our own versions, right? And we're sort of walking through those thoughts, walking through it with no, I'm not going to believe those thoughts. I want to find out who's here. I want to connect. Each of the students was walking with a question that meant something personally to them. Not some abstracted philosophical question, but something that was up for them in their lives. Their education, their human education. What's going on in your heart, your mind, for you? So they were walking with these questions. And we come across this guy, about my age probably, black man, and he's carrying a beer can in a brown paper bag and a cigarette. And he's kind of standing across the street looking at us. And we look at him, and I kind of go, hey, just reaching out, I threw him the ball, And he caught it, and he goes, hey, basically, what are you doing here, man? What's going on? And I'm like, hey, so we're walking to listen. We're from the school, and each of these students has a question that they're walking with. Can we ask you our questions? And he goes, depends on what kind of questions they are. What's going on? What are you trying to sell me? What are you trying to evangelize to me? Depends on what kind of questions they are. I'm like, they're pretty good questions, man. He's like, all right. So we crossed the street, and it felt like we were crossing the chasm that exists between us before we've encountered one another and learned who we are, listened to one another, crossing the chasm. And I asked the young woman, there's a young woman and 2 young men. I say, hey, can you start us off? And she goes, okay. And it was beautiful. She just dropped into her heart, dropped into her sincerity, And it's it's vulnerable to ask this kind of a question because it's going to reveal something about you that might be hard for you to have seen. So for example, she goes, Yeah, so my question's about happiness, because I've kind of forgotten what it is. I don't know what it is anymore. So what is happiness? So brave. Oh my gosh, so brave. What is happiness? The guy hears this question, and his face, it was as if he had just been transported to Venus or something. He was like, where am I? Like, where had he ever been asked a question like that? As if he had lived something worthy, as if he had survived something, endured something such that it might benefit the question asker, be of service to them, as if he might have some kind of wisdom. Had he ever been seen this way? Have you? How often are these kinds of questions asked? Start paying attention, and you may find that they're quite rare. So he goes, what? Happy? He's just like, oh, wait, this is what this is? Okay. Happiness? And he just dove head first into the question. Moments before, he was like, nah. But when he heard our authentic interest, our willingness to listen, and then when he began to trust our ability to do so, which we were learning, he dove in. And he goes, my happiness is these kids. He had his sons riding around on bicycles around him. My kids, man. And he tells us this story about how he was imprisoned for a few years. And for 1 or 2 of those years, he didn't get to see his kids. Their mother didn't bring them to him. One day he gets a visit, and he's sitting with his back to the wall, to the door, and door opens and he hears the voices of his kids. Leaps up and starts rushing to them to take up his happiness in his arms, and then he's tackled to the ground because physical contact isn't allowed. And then he's put in solitary confinement for 60 days or something like that. And the kids were just mesmerized, transfixed, receiving the teachings that this man has to offer us about what it is to be a black man in America today, what it is to be human, criminal justice system, fatherhood. He's teaching and preaching, man. We're giving him that space to sing his songs, to tell his stories, to show himself. And because he felt our trustworthiness, our sincerity, he showed it. It didn't take much. It took a lot. They had to commit their whole day, some of their day to it, and they had to go into the unknown of what this was going to be, and they had to ask their question. But after that, it started rolling. And this guy stumbled into the ending of his answer to her question. And then he looks at the young man, and he goes, you, what's your question? He wanted to keep going, Of course. This kind of listening, this kind of connection is like water for our spirits. And too much of the time, it's like we're walking through a desert where nobody's listening like this. So perhaps he needed it that day. Perhaps the students needed it that day. I know I did. To me, this is what communion is. This is what connection is. And it's the work of peacemaking. So this is walking to listen.